The president's Jewish outreach, the Jewish community reaching out to Israeli expats, new nominations in the theater world, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. President Barack Obama had a week of Jewish outreach last week, starting with an interview with one of the most prominent Jewish journalists on the topic of Israel, and ending with a visit to a Washington, D.C. area synagogue. In his interview with Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, the president linked support for Israel with support for civil rights here in the United States, saying, quote, "There's a direct line between supporting the right of the Jewish people to have a homeland and to feel safe and free of discrimination and persecution, and the right of African Americans to vote and have equal protection under the law. These things are indivisible in my mind, but what is also true by extension is that I have to show that same kind of regard to other peoples. And I think it is true to Israel's traditions and its values, its founding principles, that it has to care about those Palestinian kids." In his visit to the conservative synagogue, Adas Israel, the president walked in on a preschool singing Shabbat Shalom and clapped along, toured the Beit Midrash or study hall, and spoke to those assembled in the sanctuary. The president invoked the history of the synagogue and its presidential root.
Now, I wanted to come here to celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month because this congregation, like so many around the country, helps us to tell the American story. And back in 1876, when President Grant helped dedicate Adas Israel, he became the first sitting president in history to attend a synagogue service. And at the time, it was an extraordinarily symbolic gesture, not just for America, but for the world.
The president also spoke about why support for a two-state solution is part of his agenda.
And it is precisely because I care so deeply about the state of Israel. It's precisely because, yes, I have high expectations for Israel the same way I have high expectations for the United States of America, that I feel a responsibility to speak out honestly about what I think will lead to long-term security and to the preservation of a true democracy in the Jewish homeland. And I believe that's two states for two people. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. Just as Israelis built a state in their homeland, Palestinians have a right to be a free people on their land as well. Now, I want to emphasize that's not easy. The Palestinians are not the easiest of partners. The neighborhood is dangerous. And we cannot expect Israel to take existential risks with their security, so that any deal that takes place has to take into account the genuine dangers of terrorism and hostility. But it is worthwhile for us to keep up the prospect, the possibility of bridging divides and being just and looking squarely at what's possible but also necessary in order for Israel to be the type of nation that it was intended to be in its earliest founding.
But another kind of equality struggle continues in the Orthodox and particularly the ultra-Orthodox sectors of the Jewish community, where discrimination against women continues to manifest itself in new ways. The official picture of the new Israeli government was altered by various ultra-Orthodox newspapers to remove the women within it. On the front page of Sephardic ultra-Orthodox newspaper Actually, for example, an already cropped photo managed to remove 3 women, including Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked. Those 3 women were placed prominently in the official photo. The only 3 women serving in ministerial positions in Israel. Many other ultra-Orthodox newspapers and websites took a similar approach of either cropping out or blurring the women in these pictures. Of course, the official photo itself speaks to problems of women's inclusion in Israel overall. Of the 23 government ministers in the new government, only 3 are women. But in covering Israeli culture, we are often too focused on what happens within Israel itself. As part of a series on how Israeli expatriates are adjusting to life in the United States and how the Jewish community is doing in absorbing them, Rebecca Honig-Friedman stops by an after-school program targeted precisely at these Israelis' children.
Israelis living in New York City have access to a lot of the comforts of home. Authentic hummus and falafel, their favorite coffee chain, even a shakshuka truck. But one thing that's been less easy to attain is an Israeli-style Jewish education for their children. Until now. One of the biggest concerns for Israelis living outside of Israel is that their children will grow up without an Israeli identity. And that's precisely the issue being addressed by the after-school program called Keshet. Run by the Israeli American Council, IAC Keshet mimics the common American Hebrew school structure, offering supplementary after-school instruction for kids aged 4 to 10, and an early childhood program called Keshet Tot. But unlike a typical American Hebrew school program, Keshet aims to immerse kids in Israeli culture and the speaking of modern Hebrew. Alexandra Ben Abba, IAC's manager of educational programming and the mother of a 2.5-year-old, explained.
We have a different approach. We really put a large emphasis on talking and using the language as a live language to communicate and to create and build culture with, and not just learning how to decode the letters and be able to read the Bible for your bar or bat mitzvah. We really want the kids to have fun and have a really positive experience with the language.
Originally established 5 years ago at Congregation Beth Elohim in Brooklyn, IAC Keshet now has 3 locations, one in Brooklyn, one in Lower Manhattan, and one here on the Upper West Side at Congregation B'nai Jeshurun's Community House, with a total of 100 kids currently enrolled, and 40 toddlers enrolled in the Keshet Tot program. And while a new dual language track offers an alternative Hebrew school experience for children of Jewish Americans, most of the kids at Keshet have at least one Israeli parent and speak Hebrew at home. Batya Ayob Surat is one of those Israeli parents. Married to an American man, she worries about being her daughter's only connection to Israel.
For me, it's very important that they identify themselves as Israelis, and that only comes from doing the things that Israelis do, learning the culture, living the culture, and not just to learn about Israel from the media.
Addressing that concern, Keshet offers children of Israelis the same kind of Jewish education that their Israeli peers might get. Classes are taught by Israeli teachers and conducted entirely in Hebrew, while the curriculum includes popular Israeli songs, books, and poetry. Even the religious instruction is taught with a more cultural Israeli approach, said Ella Matuki, who teaches 4- and 5-year-olds and Keshet Tot.
You really go with what a child would learn if they were in kindergarten in Israel. So they would learn the basics, they would learn the story of the holiday, they would learn the songs that go with it, they would learn any kind of custom, what we eat, what we do, what we say at Seder, but we won't really go into sort of the more religious background of it.
For more on IAC Keshet, watch the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. With theater awards season in full swing, Meredith Gansman stopped by the Drama Desk Awards nominations in a segment from our theater show, Row J.
Before the Tony Awards, the 60th Annual Drama Desk Awards will be presented on May 31st. Drama Desk and Tony Award winners Judith Light and Jesse Mueller announced the nominations, praising those who dole out the Drama Desk Awards.
I mean, they are the people whose opinions we value. They're the journalists. They're the people who have an eye. They're long-term. They see everything, and I have a great and tremendous amount of respect for them.
All the artists sort of in one place, whether it's Broadway or off Broadway, and I think that's a really special thing. It's important for us to get together as a community and just celebrate art, not art.
It's just honoring good work. It doesn't matter the scale or how many number of seats are in the house and how much money it's making. It's honoring good work.
For Outstanding Choreography nominee Warren Carlyle, his work for On the 20th Century has both personal and professional meaning.
You know, working on that show was really a lifesaver for me. It was a difficult time in my life, and and I got to go to rehearsal every day and laugh.
Outstanding Actress nominee for An American in Paris, Leanne Cope, also feels deeply connected to her production.
The show is life-affirming. I've never felt more passionate about something that a work thing ever in my life.
Max von Essen, Outstanding Featured Actor in a Musical nominee, said the An American in Paris company has been on a high since its 12 Drama Desk and Tony Award nominations, and also some recent celebrity appearances at the show.
We were already on a high. We recently opened.
You had Barbara in the audience.
We had Barbara in the I know, we've had celebrities coming through. It's been really cool.
And Barbara. And
Barbara Streisand. I know, it's crazy. The whole audience stopped to give her a standing ovation, wouldn't stop taking pictures. We started Act 2 10 minutes late. Barbara.
Tanya Pinkins, nominated for Outstanding Actress in a Play for Rashida Speaking, said she is most proud of bringing a conversation about race into the theater.
You know, we don't get to talk about it at home. We don't get to talk about it at work because we're still a very segregated culture.
Nominated for Outstanding Featured Actor in a Musical for Something Rotten, Christian Borle says the work is the greatest reward.
You know, what's so nice, at the end of the day, we get to go and do the show that we love so much.
The 60th Annual Drama Desk Awards will be presented on May 31st at 8 p.m. at Manhattan's Town Hall. For more from the Drama Desk Award nominations, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, this week on Up Close, memoirs from two men who blazed a trail by being different from what many expected of them. Congressman Barney Frank was the first member of Congress to voluntarily come out as gay, and the first to marry someone of the same sex while in office. He also developed a reputation as a confrontational speaker and legislator who fought for what he believed in. We discuss his book, Frank, A Life in Politics from the Great Society to Same-Sex Marriage. And then, we see a lot of writing these days from ultra-Orthodox Jews who are leaving or who have left their communities, and occasionally their families. But one man started that genre under the blog name Hasidic Rebel. He's now got a memoir out, and Shulam Dean stopped by to discuss All Who Go Do Not Return. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Barney Frank. There's this question on the book jacket that opens your book. How did a disheveled, intellectually combative gay Jew with a thick accent become one of the most effective and funniest politicians of our time?
I managed to figure out kind of early in life what I was good at and what I'm not good at. And we're all a mix of strengths and weaknesses. And I was lucky because I was attracted to go into politics, and my skills are best there. I'd also thought about being an academic, but I have a short attention span. So when I was theoretically working on a PhD thesis, it went nowhere because I was just too easily distracted. But having a short attention span is very helpful if you're a member of a legislative body, because in the course of a day you're going to deal with 7 or 8 different issues. So essentially that's how I did it, was, as I said, to kind of focus on my strengths and think hard about, and this was the issue, how do you maximize your ability to get done the things you want? And that is, how do you ingratiate yourself with other people?
We hear a lot today, for example, when we recently had the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the idea that for a lot of gay men and lesbian women in the military, that there was almost a sense of just needing to spend so much concentration on being closeted. Did you feel that?
No question. Having to conceal an important part of yourself takes a lot of work, and even more than the time, it takes enormous emotional energy. And interestingly, when I tried when I first got to Washington to be, as far as the public was concerned, I was closeted, neutral. I was trying to live as a gay man privately. So more and more straight people figured this out. And in the year or so before I decided I would volunteer that I was gay, a number of good liberal members of Congress, very supportive of LGBT rights, said to me, please don't do that. We heard you're planning to do this. They were afraid that I would be less effective on every other issue except gay rights. And I couldn't deny that to them. I thought that might be the case, but my answer was, but you know, I just can't live like this. I can't live denying myself. So after I did come out, most of those who had urged me not to came up and said, well, glad that you did, over and above the political impact of helping people accept gay people. You're better at the job because you're nicer. Legislating is a very personal business.
You were unafraid to be, at the same time, an advocate, a legislative advocate.
Thank you. That was very important to me. I decided in 1972 2 things. One, I would have to be a coward. I wanted to get elected. I thought I could do good in a lot of areas if I got elected, because I thought, again, my particular combination of talents and weaknesses, I'd be very good as a legislator, not so good in other places. Secondly, though, so what I said, all right, I won't tell the truth about being gay, but I will never be a hypocrite. I determined the first day I just said I was going to run for office that I would be an advocate for LGBT rights. Gay rights was what we called them at the time. And there was one suggestion, well, there's an internal dialogue. Should I hold back because people might think I was gay? And I said, no, it's bad enough that I can't be honest about who I am. I will never shrink in any way from doing the most that I can. And I continue to have contempt for those people who are themselves gay and then vote for legislation or enforce laws that discriminate against other gay people. I think we have to have a clear distinction that the right to privacy is not a license for hypocrisy.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish Channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, Iowa Uplink Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast and the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.